Bonjour et bienvenue sur France 24.
Welcome to this interview with France 24 and Radio France International. We are in New York, in the margins of the United Nations General Assembly with the President of the Niger Republic. This is Christophe Boisbouvier from RFI. Good afternoon, Mr. President. Mr. President, in Mali and in Burkina Faso, the jihadists control swathes of those countries. G5 Sahel is over, Barkhane has gone away because of the security environment. Do you believe that there is a danger for Niger and it will be the next domino to fall?
Well, the situation, as we see it in the region of our three countries from a security perspective, has worsened. So much is clear. As to whether that situation is likely to lead to the situation that you suggested, a domino falling, I don't believe so. In fact, I don't believe so because for a very long time we have been very different from Mali. And it appears different from Burkina Faso as well. On top of what we're seeing in this situation, i.e. a balance of power, a very clear balance of power between us and terrorists, we have also moved to a more comfortable situation for us through the cooperation that we've been able to achieve with our external partners, most notably France. With Barkhane in our country and with their troops near the Malian border, we've been able to benefit from a stronger position, and this has led to the situation being much more favorable for us. It's also worth saying that if you compare our situation today to what it was in 2019 or 20, you can't even compare the two situations. The headcount in our army has gone up significantly. Our armed forces capacity has also gone up. We've been able to purchase equipment as well. All of these factors mean that right now our army is much stronger and therefore much more able to face the situation even in its worsened state in Sahel.
Since last November, and 3 Nigerian civilians died, there were fights, occasionally fights with the French army, and occasionally there have been demonstrations against the French. A few days ago there was one in Niamey. So you said that this anti-French feeling was not very strong in Niger. But are you not looking away from reality?
I can only speak of Niger. I can't speak to what's going on elsewhere in the Sahel region. In Niger, as a democratically elected statesman, my interests are to keep our party in power for as long as possible. Therefore, I weigh my words very carefully, and I need to make sure that I act in line with what I say. And if what you're claiming was true, I would be the first to know it, and therefore I would be the very first person to shift my attitude based on the changing situation. What you're discussing mainly comes from social media. At least for Niger, I do not believe that this is a real concern for our citizens when you look at the other issues that they face. What citizens want, their main demand is to be safe. They want an improvement in the security situation. So if you look at that, I think that fighting against the French or the Americans just doesn't make any sense. On top of that, as you said, there were protests, one of which was organized last Sunday, and there were fewer than 500 attendees to that. This further goes to show that this phenomenon is far more mediatized than its actual presence in society would suggest.
Early this year, Mr. President, you said that there were conversations underway with some of the jihadist leaders. From a practical viewpoint, are there any results on the ground? Is it the reason why there seems to be more quiet in your country, apparently? Is it also the reason, this dialogue, why the American nun Sue Helen Tennyson was freed on the 29th of August?
We're talking about young shepherds. And these young people are involved in this phenomenon that honestly is more like banditry to feed themselves than anything else. And what they do has a big impact on the people around them. Seeing as we can't work directly with them, we can't work with them as political partners and have a high-level dialogue with them, that means that we need to work with a more grassroots approach. This approach involves community representatives and involves us explaining things like the mission of the High Authority for Consolidation and Peace. The aim is to have these communities get along, reduce tensions between them.
With due respect, in order to secure the liberation of an American nun, you have to speak with the leaders.
No, we didn't have negotiations with leaders, if there even is such a thing in the sense that you mean it. We spoke with deputies, with underbosses, with whom we have regular contact. We explained to them that there was no reason to do what they were doing, and that is work that's ongoing. We haven't seen spectacular results from what we've been doing, but it has led to this cooling of our relations between the armed forces and also between communities.
You said in New York, once again, that education was fundamental. You're talking about bringing those youngsters back on the right path. But with the tremendous rise of population numbers, we know that a lot of young people would like to cross the Mediterranean or join the jihadist forces. So what are you doing to leave them in the country?
In Niger, we don't have any young people who want to cross the Mediterranean, and this has been the case for a long time. The issue is due to an issue with education. Therefore, we need to urgently act. We must promote education, and we must make sure that this education is reaching the people who have been the most excluded from it in the past, rural populations. This is an investment that is something that we need to consider if we want to see long-term results. There are things in the short term that we can do, economic levers that we can use to stop people leaving and also making people safe. And then we also have that balance of power that needs to be achieved between all of the players in this violence, a violence that only continues because some parties are getting away with doing certain things. To protect people, you need institutions, you need a state.
In July of this year, ECOWAS decided to lift economic and trade sanctions against Mali. We know you were against. Right after that, they arrested 49 Ivorian soldiers, calling them mercenaries. Were those sanctions lifted too early? Should they be brought back?
That's not a question I can really answer. It's certainly regrettable that the Ivorian soldiers were arrested by Malian authorities. I think it's completely absurd that it happened like it did. The words that President Ouattara said during our ECOWAS meetings stuck with me. He speaks of Mali with a lot of affect in his voice. And he was a key player in lifting the sanctions through ECOWAS on the country.
And you were rather opposed.
All I see now is that he is getting only ingratitude from the people who benefited from the decision to lift the sanctions that President Ouattara was pushing.
He felt betrayed.
Yes, I believe he was betrayed.
Mr. President, since Barkhane left, it is the Malian forces, the FAMA, in conjunction with the Wagner Company, that is fighting the jihadists, the terrorists. Are they doing better than the French? And are they present, are they active in the northeast, which shares a border with Niger?
The situation in the Ménaka region has worsened significantly since Barkhane left. Since the end of March, terrorists have been able to take back swathes of countryside and they've killed many more people. This led to tension between communities reaching an all-time high. The Malian armed forces are supposedly in Ménaka, with Russians under their orders, but my observation is that this hasn't prevented the situation from worsening.
You're not sure they are there?
They are. They are in Ménaka, supposedly with the Russians. At least for the Russians, that's a question mark. Whether they're there with or without any Russians, the situation in Ménaka has worsened. The situation in Gao is also getting worse. The tensions between the Fulani and the Tuareg people is now higher than it has ever been. There's a real risk of massacre between these populations, widespread massacre. I really don't think that that was the end goal of getting the French to leave. You might have thought that after all of the criticism that was leveled at the French before they left, that we would have done something different once they left. But the situation has gotten so much worse.
Do you believe that the jihadi flag could soon be flying in Ménaka and Gao?
The flag flying over Ménaka is likely. At least, I believe at this point that the jihadist forces are intending to attack Ménaka. As to whether they want to stay there, that's not really the way they do things. They don't really move into populated areas like Ménaka. It's not the way they act. They don't move into towns or cities like Ménaka, and they don't really want to run or administrate at all. But from a military standpoint, they have the ability and capacity to attack Ménaka. I don't believe that they have enough capacity to attack Gao, but in the surrounding regions, they certainly have made headway.
Both Mali and Burkina Faso are having difficulties with the jihadists. But you just hosted in Niamey the coup leader, Colonel Damba. You are considering a defense agreement between your two countries. Does it mean that there are good coup leaders in Ouagadougou and bad coup leaders in Bamako?
Not really. You know, we deal with the Malian troops just as we deal with the Burkina Faso troops. Remember, when they were under President Bandao, that was the military in power, and we had completely normal relations with them. It's when the second coup d'etat happened, it's when they decided that elections wouldn't be a priority going forward, when they reneged on their commitments. We would have liked to continue to cooperate with them just as we had in the past, like with the Burkina Faso people. They're our neighbors. That's the situation. And we take that situation into account. We know that we need to cooperate to protect each other, to strengthen each other, and so that we can strengthen each other against our common enemies.
The coup leaders in Guinea-Conakry want to keep their 3-year transition schedule. Should ECOWAS consider heavy sanctions, as was advocated by its acting president, Mr. Mbalo from Guinea-Bissau?
It's not quite the same situation. They have sea access, and the strongest actions that could be taken against them would be sanctions related to closing borders, which would be only medium effective, and also currency sanctions that are unlikely to bother them. It's because the Guinean military know this that they're behaving in the way that we are seeing right now and we've seen for a long time. They have no intention of being cooperative at all with ECOWAS, as if they were never members and have no intention of ever being members. Sanctions are nevertheless possible, and sanctions are in fact likely if the dialogue that we have with them does not change.
Thank you, Mr. President, for this interview. Thank you for watching us on France 24 and Radio France International.